So with today's case, the Jamie Close case, the reason I ended up choosing this one and making a TikTok version of it, now a YouTube version of it, is actually pretty straightforward. It's because even though it's true, if you were to make a movie out of this case, the viewers wouldn't really believe it because the perpetrator in this case has no motive and has no history of committing any crimes. I think he had a parking ticket. And he targets a child. I mean, putting that all together, you don't see that. That is not a popular archetype for a movie. The idea that there are just these random, perpetrators out there just targeting random children and harming them and their families. There has to be a motive, especially when it comes to children being involved. There has to be a motive. And in this case, there really wasn't. And even the perpetrator, when he was in prison, he wrote a letter to Jamie and her surviving family members where he kind of tried to explain why he did it, but even he didn't have strong enough language to communicate what it was. He made it seem like it was pretty complicated, and even he didn't know. He just said, hey, look, I'm not a serial killer. I just had to do this, and I don't really know why. So it's just one of the more disturbing cases when you go into it knowing that this whole thing was perpetrated by someone who had no criminal history. He had no connection to the victims except that he randomly had a chance encounter with one of them. And it just kind of happened. It's just one of those horrible things that even now, no one really understands, including the killer himself. So let's dive into it. In 2018, 21-year-old Jake Patterson is on his way to work at a cheese factory in Wisconsin. He'd only been working there for a couple of days. This is like his third day on the job. He's this kind of typical guy leading a typical life in Wisconsin. And he's driving his Ford Taurus. He comes to a stop behind a school bus where middle school kids are getting on the bus. And he's sitting there and he looks up and he sees for the first time in his life a blonde-haired, green-eyed girl who ended up being 13-year-old Jamie Close. And as he's sitting there, because this all came out in a very lengthy confession, so we have lots of details about this case. As he's sitting there watching Jamie, who again, he doesn't know, get on the bus, he has this realization that she is going to be the girl that he takes. He actually says that sitting behind the wheel, he's like, I realized right then and there that she's the one I'm gonna take. And so a guy with no criminal history, he's sitting there coming up with this plan of how he's gonna abduct this girl. And it would come out later in his confession, which again was very lengthy, that he put a ton of effort into planning out this abduction. So let's talk about Jake's plan. He takes his father's Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun, which is a very commonly purchased weapon. He assumed that because it is, so widely purchased, it would be hard to track. Okay, so he takes his gun, takes a couple slugs, so he's got his weapon. Then he goes and purchases a balaclava, so a mask, a whole head mask from Walmart. He shaves his head, shaves his beard so that there wouldn't be any hairs, for forensic evidence at the crime scene. This is all so premeditated. He went out and purchased gloves and wiped his gloves all so they wouldn't have prints on them. He purchased steel-toed boots and dark jeans and a dark jacket. In the car he was going to use, because he plans on abducting Jamie, and he knew he was going to be keeping her in the trunk. He cut the cord inside of his vehicle. It was when you press this button inside the car, it would open the trunk. Basically, he didn't want any access to the trunk unless you have the key. So he cuts that cord. He disconnected the dome light inside of his Taurus, his Ford Taurus, to try to better conceal him when he's in the car. I mean, this guy, he's really thinking hard about how he's going to do this. He knew he was going to go in that house, he's going to take Jamie, and he had his big plan, right? 2 separate times, Jake tried, unsuccessfully, to abduct Jamie. He drove to their house the first time, and there were cars in the driveway, so he got spooked and he leaves. He comes back and he's about to drive up the driveway when lights come on, so he leaves again. But on October 15th, 2018, unfortunately, he was successful. It was around midnight when Jake Patterson rolls into the close family's driveway. The lights in his car are off, the headlights are off, and he rolls into the driveway. And inside of this very modest home, Jamie was sleeping with her dog, Molly. And Molly hears the car pull into the driveway and starts barking. Wakes up Jamie. Jamie looks out, she sees a car she doesn't recognize, it's the middle of the night, and she runs to her parents' room and she alerts her parents. Jamie's father, James, he goes to the front door with a flashlight. Meanwhile, Denise, that's Jamie's mother, and Jamie retreat into the bathroom where they shut the door. They sense that this was potentially going to be a home invasion, and certainly they were right. So they actually barricade the door with a dresser that was in there, and they get in the tub and they shut the curtains. And so James is at the front door and he watches Jake Patterson get out of his car, calmly walk up the steps to the front door. And at this time, James is thinking that perhaps this is the police. And so when Jake arrives at the door and starts banging on the door, James shines his light out through the window, kind of gets a peek at him, then moves over to the door itself where there's this little tiny window on the door. And he looks through, shining the light, and he says, "Show me your badge." And unfortunately, it was at the same time that Jake raises his shotgun and pulls the trigger, shoots right through the glass, hits James, and James dies immediately. Back in the bathroom, Jamie would later say that when she heard that shotgun blast, that she knew that her father was dead. And I think Denise, her mother, knew that as well, because immediately Denise picks up her phone and calls 911 as she's talking to the dispatcher, who said that there were no police in the area. So further confirming that this was definitely not the police, because they didn't see that interaction at the door, they just heard it. Jake at the front door is trying to bust in the door. He can't do it, so he takes his shotgun, ejects a spent round, and then puts a slug through the doorknob, making it come wide open. He pushes it open, steps over the body of James, and begins to search the house. The house is empty, every door is open except one, and it's the bathroom door where Denise and Jamie are hiding in the bathroom. Jake begins to try to push the door open, he can't do it, and finally he just starts trying to smash the door in. And after 10, 15 blows, he actually managed to split the top half of the door open because the dresser was blocking the lower half. He goes into the bathroom and he rips down the shower curtain, and there is Denise bear hugging and protecting her daughter, Jamie, in the tub. Jake hands duct tape to the mother, Denise, and tells her to put duct tape over the mouth and the hands of her daughter. She refuses, she's protecting her daughter. Jake sets his shotgun down, pushes Denise aside, and does it himself. And then, after getting Jamie out of the tub, he picks his shotgun up again, aims it at the mother, turns his head, and he pulls the trigger and he kills the mother. Picks up Jamie, she's only about 5 foot, 100 pounds, and he drags her out to his car, opens up the trunk of his Taurus, puts her in, shuts it, and he's on his way. He was in the house for a total of 4 minutes. He would say in his confession, Jake, that as he's driving away, about 20 seconds after departing the house, he saw all the cop cars coming down the road, and actually police officers would say they remembered a Taurus yielding to the police cruisers as they came in. He makes his way around them and off he goes. And Jamie would say she remembered hearing the sirens and then they fade as they disappear. Jake would drive 70 miles to his house where he would keep Jamie prisoner. For the next 3 months, investigators, the local population, everybody is looking for Jamie. And at the same time, people didn't have high hopes for her safe return. In the vast majority of cases like these, where a child's been abducted, unfortunately, they usually don't get home safe. And so the whole community is just devastated. This is gaining national attention. Everybody's looking for Jamie and they can't find her. The whole time, she was being held 70 miles away in Jake Patterson's cluttered, kind of crummy house that was out in the middle of the woods. When they got to his house, he burned her clothes and his gloves and the duct tape. He gave her his sister's pajamas. And then he had her go under the bed, this bed he had in the house, and he barricaded her underneath the bed. And so she had a pillow and a blanket, and she was just underneath this bed. And, you know, that was it. She basically was ignored. I mean, her captor, Jake Patterson, he puts her under the bed, and he warns her, you know, if you leave or try to escape, you know, bad things are going to happen to you. And because she did witness him kill her parents, she knows he's capable of that, and he knows that she knows that he's capable of that. So he had this stranglehold on her where he basically just said, you're staying under the bed, and don't you dare leave. And she listened, and frankly, you can't blame her, right? You know, and so she would go stretches of 8, 10, 12 hours of laying under the bed with no food, no water, no bathroom breaks. But ultimately, she was just kind of ignored. There wasn't really a plan for, you know, what was going to happen when she got to the house. He just kind of neglected her. After 2 weeks where he was really on guard, and he told her that he was keeping a shotgun right outside her door in case anything went down with the police, when no one came looking for them, or when no one arrived at his place, he felt very confidently that he had gotten away with his crimes, to the point where he actually, Jamie would say, he started having guests over. You know, he had friends over, and he just told her, stay in the room, don't come out. And so for 87 days, that's how it was. She just was neglected. This poor girl was underneath this bed, you know, just wondering what the heck's going to happen, with obviously no time to grieve over the loss of her parents. Mr. Patterson, he really didn't leave the house. And when he did, I think he left one time to visit a grandparent, and he was very aggressive in warning her that he would hurt her if she tried to leave. But for the most part, you know, he didn't leave the house. But you could tell in looking at this case that he became fairly confident that he was just going to get away with this. And so he actually applied for a job. And he left one morning to go to the interview. And it's kind of funny, on his, in a dark way, he wrote on his, what did he write? On his application that he's an honest, hardworking guy. And under skills, he said he doesn't have much work experience, but he shows up to work and is a quick learner. And so here he goes out to just get a job and go back to normal. And when he left that morning, Jamie, who's under the bed, she's done. She's not going to be a captive anymore. And as soon as he leaves, she pushes aside the barricade of, you know, there's some weights that were there and dressers. She pushes it all aside. She runs out. She puts on his shoes, which are too big for her. She puts them on the wrong feet. And she runs out the door. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know anything, but she's gone. A woman was walking her dog around 4 p.m. Her name was Jeannie Nutter. And she sees this girl, this teenager, who doesn't have a coat on. She doesn't have gloves on. It's bitterly cold. They're in the middle of Wisconsin in the wintertime. And she sees her coming towards her, and she can tell kind of instinctively that something's wrong. Okay, this is not just some nice kid coming down the road. There's an issue here. And as she got closer, and the girl said, "I'm lost. I need help. My name is Jamie," the woman, Jeannie, said that she immediately knew who it was. She lived in the area, and she had seen the posters up for Jamie. She knew exactly who she was. She gave her a big hug and held her and said, you know, I've got you. I'm going to take care of you. And so holding her closely, she brings her to a nearby neighbor's house. She said, this is Jamie Close. We have to call the police. And they go in there, and the homeowners got their weapons out, and they guarded the door, and they huddled around Jamie while Jeannie called the police. And the police just didn't even know what to do. They were so shocked that they had found Jamie Close that it actually took a minute for them to recognize what they were saying and how urgent it was that you come here right now, because at some point her captor, who can't be that far away, is going to recognize that she's not there anymore. And so they send the police, and you know, luckily Jamie is brought in and is saved. You know, certainly not from the emotional toll, but she's physically safe. Jake comes home from his big job interview, and he sees that Jamie's gone, and he sees footsteps leaving his property in the snow, and he goes out looking for her. And you know, just because this is the way things go sometimes, he was immediately rounded up by the police. They found his car, they found him, and as soon as he was pulled over, he didn't resist. In fact, he immediately identified himself and said that he did it. Jake Patterson was given a life sentence without the opportunity for parole, so he will die in prison. But to this day, no one really understands how this could have happened. And going back to what I said at the beginning, cases like this don't happen. There's always some reason for a crime such as this. We can't, as human beings, accept that some stranger has the ability to randomly target a child and go as far as to kill their parents in front of them and hold them hostage when they have no criminal history. There's no red flags. He happened to see her getting on a bus, and that was all he needed. I mean, how could that possibly be the case? But in this unfortunate case, it just is. So that's gonna do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Please hit like and subscribe. I'll be doing stories like this one and many more, mysteries, scary stories, spooky stuff, interesting stuff on this channel at least once a week. So I hope that you will continue to tune in. And please follow me on social media. I am MrBallen on TikTok, and I am JohnBallen416 on Instagram. If you have story suggestions, you can hit me up on Instagram, and I will definitely get back to you. Hey, what's going on, guys? MrBallen here. You probably know me from TikTok. Hopefully you're starting to get to know me on YouTube as well. Today we have a really fascinating mystery. And no, I'm not going to be saying that about every single mystery I do. I think I said that about the last one, the Dyatlov case one. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. But this one really is. It's probably in the top 5 of the most fascinating unsolved mysteries on the internet. And I think the reason is because there's this video footage. But there's really a remarkable story around that footage, and that's the story I want to tell. And that is the case of Elisa Lam. The too long didn't read version. Elisa is this young, smart, beautiful college student. She makes it to Los Angeles, and then she disappears. She was found dead in this water tank on the roof of this sketchy hotel, and there's video footage of her right before she winds up in the water tank, which is just totally bizarre. Elisa Lam was the daughter of Chinese immigrants. She was born in 1991 in Canada. She was an avid blogger. She was very into fashion. She also was dealing with some mental health issues. She had been diagnosed as having bipolar disorder. She had also been diagnosed as having depression. Even though her family initially was very close hold about detailing anything about her mental health struggles, they had never seen any suicide attempts or any suicidal ideations. On January 13th, 2013, Elisa Lam posted that she had just purchased her tickets to travel to San Diego, then on to Los Angeles, Santa Cruz, and then on to San Francisco. She was calling this her West Coast tour. So she heads off on this tour. She goes to San Diego, and then she takes an Amtrak train up to Los Angeles. And so she arrives in Los Angeles on January 26th, and she checks into this notoriously sketchy hotel called the Cecil Hotel, which is actually located right near Skid Row in LA. So it's a large homeless population, very high crime rate. And in fact, the Cecil Hotel itself, in addition to being located in a pretty seedy area, it had a fairly macabre history itself. It was actually famously associated with the Black Dahlia murder, where the victim had actually been at the bar inside the Cecil Hotel before she vanished. And then, including the Black Dahlia, there were 15 other non-natural deaths associated with the Cecil Hotel ever since it was built in the 1920s. And you would think that it would have been condemned, but in fact, LA has made it a landmark right now, so it's kind of protected, the hotel itself. But either way, she checks into the Cecil Hotel on January 26th, and initially she's put into a shared hostel-style room with some other tourists in the area. But it would come out in the investigation that she actually had to be moved out of that room due to the complaints of her roommates that, said she was acting very odd. And so they moved her to a private room. Now, Elisa was traveling alone. And if you combine that with the fact that, she was dealing with some mental health issues, her parents were very nervous about this trip. And so they had made this deal that in order for her to do this West Coast swing on her own, that she would need to check in with them every single night. And so she was doing that. So she takes off through San Diego, she checks into Cecil Hotel, she's checking in with them every night. But on January 31st, which was the day she was supposed to check out of the Cecil Hotel, she went silent. And her parents, who were all over this, immediately were very concerned, and they called the Los Angeles Police Department. The police acted very quickly on this case. They descended on the Cecil Hotel. They started looking everywhere. They interviewed hotel staff. They interviewed local businesses. I mean, they plastered her picture everywhere, and they couldn't find her. The hotel staff, they said that, we saw Elisa, and they did mention that she had been moved from the shared room to her own room, but that any interaction she had had with staff, which there weren't that many, was she was minding her own business. She was by herself, and she seemed like a totally normal guest of the hotel. There was a business owner. She owned a bookstore called The Last Bookstore, kind of ironic, who saw Elisa Lam. She was one of the last people to see Elisa, and she said that she was there purchasing gifts, clearly for her family, little trinkets to kind of memorialize her trip through LA. But that was it. And so despite the massive attempts to find her, and this case had also gained quite a bit of media attention, not just in LA, but internationally. I mean, this was all the way back in China, where her family was from. I mean, this was making headlines everywhere. Despite all of that, no one could find Elisa. Then the police were given footage of Elisa in the elevator, and the police released that footage to the public, and it pretty much immediately went viral. No one can make sense of what the heck Elisa is doing in the elevator. She gets into the elevator, she proceeds to press all of the buttons, and then hides in the corner of the elevator. And then she starts poking her head in and out into the hallway as if she's looking for someone. And then eventually she kind of gets into the threshold of the elevator and starts moving her hands around kind of crazily, like she's either talking to someone or, I mean, it really looks like she's hallucinating or something. It's very bizarre hand gestures. And then she disappears. And that was the last footage we have of her alive. And what's even stranger is probably right after this video was taken, she goes to the rooftop by her own will, or someone made her go there, and she dies. So we're looking at the last few moments of Elisa's life. Now, the footage, despite its virality and despite how much more attention this gave the case, it didn't actually provide any big breaks, because the footage just captures this woman who seems kind of disturbed on the elevator. It doesn't give away really anything that actually happened to her. But after the release of that video, over the course of the next 2 weeks, guests of the Cecil Hotel started complaining about low water pressure, as well as a foul taste in the water. In fact, one of the guests even said that the water, when she turned it on, had come out black before clearing, and then it was clear water, but then the water had a foul taste to it. On February 19th, so this is now 2 weeks after her disappearance, and now following all of these complaints about the water, Santiago Lopez, who's a maintenance worker for the Cecil Hotel, he goes up to the roof and he goes to check on the water. He opens up the water tank to see what's going on, and there, lying in the water, is the body of Elisa Lam. So a couple things about the water tank itself. So it's on the roof of the hotel, and in order to get onto the roof, you would have to go through a door that has an alarm set. So you'd have to know the alarm code. Because if you didn't and you triggered the alarm, I mean, it goes off across the whole hotel. I mean, someone would have heard this alarm. Or you could have, I guess, taken the fire escape, but that's a fairly obvious thing, and someone would have noticed, and no one claimed to have seen her taking, the fire escape up to the roof. Then let's assume you've made it on the roof somehow, either by knowing the code to the door or using the fire escape. The tank, which is this 4-foot tall tank, is actually about 10 feet off the ground. And in order to get to the tank itself, you would need to use a ladder. And there weren't any ladders present. There's no ladders anywhere, right? But so even if you manage to climb onto the tank, without the use of a ladder, there are these heavy lids on the surface of these tanks. I mean, the hotel doesn't want people getting into the drinking water, so it's pretty well guarded. If you could get the tank to, I think it actually slides off, the opening to the tank isn't particularly large, so you'd have to wriggle your way into the tank. And then once you're in, it would be nearly impossible to shut the tank again. And the tank was shut when they found it. When Santiago Lopez went up there, the latch to the lid was undone, but the lid was covering the tank. So how did she manage to bypass the alarm, climb onto the water tank without the use of a ladder, open the lid and then wriggle inside of the tank itself and then shut the lid and then, drown. How did that happen? Because her body had decomposed significantly, it was fairly difficult to run any sort of forensic testing to see what the heck happened to her. But the coroner was able to determine that this was an accidental drowning. As improbable as that sounds, that's what the coroner's report indicated. Amateur and professional sleuths alike are fairly divided on what actually happened to Elisa. Some say that if you look at the odd behavior complaints that have been made against Elisa by her roommates that first night at the Cecil Hotel when they had to move her to her own room, people point to that as, indicative of someone who had had a sort of psychotic break. And that, the footage of her in the elevator was just someone having a manic episode. And that's what caused all of this. And there's a fairly large contingent of people who believe that. Others say Elisa just committed suicide, that even though it was a complicated suicide, it was suicide nonetheless. And of course, because this is a very high-profile, unsolved case, there are theories about this being, somehow connected to the paranormal or ghosts or any number of theories. But the bottom line is, despite knowing the who, what, where, and when, and having footage and timelines, we just don't know the why. The one thing that most people investigating this case can agree on is they really want the coroner's report to be re-examined. Not because there was negligence or something, but because there has to be something else there. This can't have just been another accidental drowning when just the circumstances surrounding her death are so bizarre, and just the likelihood of her being able to get onto the roof and up into that water tank without help is a little bit far-fetched. And so, unfortunately that hasn't happened, and, for her parents, unfortunately, there's probably not going to be closure anytime soon. So that's going to do it, guys. If you haven't already, please smash like and subscribe to my channel. I'd love it if you turned on notifications as well. I'm really making a push to get more of these stories on my YouTube channel, looking to do 1 or 2 even every week. This is really my primary focus going forward, so please subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. Also, be sure to follow me on TikTok. My handle's the same as YouTube. It's MrBallen. And then also on Instagram, it's JohnBallen416. Thank you all so much, and I'll talk to you guys soon.